Makes me so damn mad a whole lot of people speak of you as tramps. By God, they didn't speak of you as tramps in 1917 and 18. No. Let me tell you something. I've been all over the world. I've seen you fellas on the streets in Washington. There isn't this well-behaved group of citizens in the world that's sitting right in this camp. Take it from me. This is the greatest demonstration of Americanism we've ever had. Pure Americanism. Willing to take this beating as you've taken it. Stand right steady. You keep every law. And why in the hell shouldn't you? Who in the hell has done all the bleeding for this country and for this law and this Constitution anyhow but you fellas?
Wow.
That dude is one bad ass. You had me look him up.
Jimmy Durante or something. Wow. What a style of speaking.
Oh, it's awesome. I love watching that. That's because that was a method of delivery, but he also was used to doing it in front of all kinds of troops of every kind. But not only that, different cultures, different countries, everything else. I mean, this dude is, he's somebody who makes me feel ashamed to be a man in a lot of ways. Everything he's done.
So, I mean,
the dude is just,
he's a rock. The guy's a rock, man.
He's amazing. He's something we sorely need.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, he's got that weird accent. It's like South Jersey, Philly. And I think he's from Philly.
Yes, yeah.
Right. But it's got that South Jersey kind of sound. He's got that hawk nose and that bantam. He's not a big guy, but he's wiry, Eric, you know?
Oh, yeah. Very.
You must have had flashbacks to the Army listening to him. That's why you're feeling terrible. You must have had flashbacks of your drill sergeant.
Now, just reading the book about him is astounding. By the way, welcome everyone. We're talking about
welcome.
Major General at this point, retired, Smedley Butler. We're going to go back in time.
Smedley Darlington Butler.
Oh yeah, there you go. But yeah, also the accent at that time. Remember around the turn of the 20th century, how English and American sounded nearly identical when you talk to the linguists, and I think that the accents too might have been closer in Philly and New York and that area. So you were probably hearing really that time. I bet New Yorkers sounded very, very close to that as well. And
certain linguists explain that in New Orleans, it's all because of shipping. It's all because of the Navy Yard, the Philadelphia Navy Yard, Brooklyn Navy Yard. And when you went to New Orleans, they had a Brooklyn accent in New Orleans.
That's that Cajun thing. Cajuns are funky because Cajuns
sounds like Brooklynese down there.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah.
But they said it's because those were the 3 stops of the ships.
That makes sense.
Right. That's why the 3 stops. It went from Brooklyn to Philly to New Orleans.
Crazy. So then you would think that St. Louis would pick it up too if you get the riverboats.
It's all the way up there. No, but this is just the shipping, big boats, the big ships coming around the horn there,
Well, insane. So you had me look into it. You had me put this together. Let's talk about this story. This is there's a couple stories though. I mean, and any part of it can really short shrift because his career is storied in of itself. And then he kind of went out as a hero.
Well, we'll get to that. Some of this may end up on locals because this story may be too big for here. But I mean, he comes in as a private, Eric, not unlike yourself, and he works his way up through the ranks. Really not even respecting authority, but he's so tough that he gets promoted. Yeah, I mean, look at that. Look he's got going on there. I mean, what the hell is that?
This is him as a major, so it's much earlier in his career.
He's 19. He became a major at 19, Eric, right?
Yep. Yeah, he was. Well, I don't remember if he was a major at 19. I think he was a captain at 19 and the youngest ever. He's the youngest brigadier general, youngest major general.
Yeah.
He was a badass. His nickname was Gimlet Eyes because he had 104-degree fever, and was so pissed off having to be in the medic's tent, he would suck on ice cubes until finally he said, "Okay, get out of here." And so he like rolled, and his eyes were like so bloodshot that he picked up the nickname.
Well, let me tell you something. He contracts in the course of his career, wherever he is, Nicaragua, he's in El Salvador, he's in China, he's in France during, World War One. Haiti, the Haiti thing is insane.
The Haiti thing's huge. He's the only guy who actually led a peaceful Haiti. Like, it was the longest period of stability in Haiti's history.
Right. Well, that's at the barrel of a gun. However, you neglect to mention that he did that at gunpoint. At one point, his men march into the Haitian assembly and cock their weapons to get rid of the Constitution of Haiti. And he was under orders to do that from the U.S. State Department. I mean, he did amazingly regretful things by his own admission upon orders from the U.S. Government. And he later in his life regrets what he did and writes a book called War is a Racket, which we'll get into a little later in the episode. But War is a Racket, that sounds familiar. That book is much later on, but he does all of these things. He becomes a double Congressional Medal of Honor winner. He wins the brevet. He wins every single award, but he realizes that his work is for the corporations, Eric, and that's his revelation. That he's going down there in Nicaragua for the Banana Wars. He goes to the Boxer Rebellion to secure American interest in China in 1901, comes back in 1927 to fight Chiang Kai-shek to protect the oil interest. This is some, they didn't have movies back then, but I guess this is this is an artist conception. Apparently the entire world showed up to put down this Boxer Rebellion. And
this is Russians and Australians.
Right. They had every type of uniform, and every ship at sea was in the port to come and fight these guys. And look at this. I mean, look at this insane standoff that they had going there. They wanted foreigners out of China. And who could blame them at this point? I mean, they were overrun by all these pockets of foreigners that were running their own interests, including us, all over China. And they finally flipped out. I mean, that was the Boxer Rebellion. Later on, in 27, when he comes back to China, there's a civil war, and he's told not to get in the middle of the civil war and just protect U.S. interests. And U.S. interests happen to be Sinclair Oil. And he realizes that he's there to protect corporate interest, and there really is no American interest in terms of citizens, that he's there to protect the corporations. And this is building up in him over the years. That the Haiti thing is so weird. Right, San Diego. Like, he ends up in San Diego. That's really where he ends up. I mean, he creates Quantico, and then he's
Quantico, San Diego.
And he ends up in San Diego. I mean, he works with these other guys named Lejeune and other guys who's
he went to Cuba with Lejeune.
That's right.
They were in the same unit, and back with Teddy, going to Cuba. I don't know if they fought with Teddy, but I don't think it was that big. I'm sure they crossed paths at some point or another in that, because that's where he started. Well,
don't forget the Mexican War, where he goes down and he decides to walk down the middle of the street with a stick and with no weapon, and point out to his men the snipers on the roofs of either side with his stick, who were then picked off by his men as he's in a hail of bullets. And he would have gotten a third Congressional Medal of Honor, but he turned that one down. He said that was unnecessary.
Oh, that one was a funny story too, because he was literally he sent it back, and then they sent it back to him. He sent it back to them. They sent it back, and it's like a back and forth. I mean, the dude was a freaking maniac.
Well, the one in Haiti is given to him by the Undersecretary of the Navy, I think, named Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which is kind of interesting. Who will later get into. It's a battle to the death between Viva's hair and my hair. As you're well aware now, this has gone completely across the inner tubes. But the reality of it is, these events that he's involved in are corporate events where we're now going into Costa Rica, we're going into Cuba, we're going into Puerto Rico, we're going into the Dominican Republic, not for American interests, but for corporate interests, for sugar, for bananas, in Mexico. We're going into Mexico. And he comes up with incredible ways, innovative ways, not military ways, devious ways to defeat the enemy. Right, Eric? I mean, these are not military solutions. These are solutions by a guy who says, this might work. You know what I mean? He goes as a British spy off of the ships in Veracruz and infiltrates Mexico as a spy.
And he was an original spy, though, too, because they filed him as a deserter.
Right.
And it was like the typical James Bond mission, or it's like, if you get caught, we cannot claim
we're
you.
going to disallow any knowledge of this action. It was like Mexican Mission Impossible there, bro.
But another way he was really creative. Like, he did a lot of things that he was, quote, ashamed of, but I'd say it's at the same time, the people loved him because he did what he could. Like,
well, the soldiers loved him.
The people did too, because
but that was later. They didn't know who he was at first.
Well,
I mean, he didn't have the type of publicity he had later.
Right. You know but when he had the power to do it, like when he was in Haiti, yes, he held him at gunpoint. And by the way, he put them under arms by the, quote, Haitian leader, who later turned on his back, but he saved the letter.
Right.
But
that was a good story.
He built an entire 21-mile road system.
Oh yeah.
He really quickly before he left, put in the whole post office system for them. He do things like that. Or what was it?
Right. You're correct. He felt that both sides in all these countries were merely gangsters exchanging power on the top. Right.
Sure.
Study this guy for Patton. No, I think Patton was Patton. I think
probably.
Patton was his own guy, but Patton's going to come into this story a little later.
Yes.
But everybody's in this story. I'm telling you, this is one of the most American stories. Forget about the Kennedy assassination. This is like the Kennedy assassination conspiracy combined with Patton. You know what I mean? Combined with these stories into one story. You know, the Smedley Butler story, which is smothered for reasons that you're going to find out in this story. The reason nobody knows about Smedley Butler, there's a reason for that. And we're going to get into that at the end of the story. But in regards to Haiti, you're correct. The Haitian people loved him, and it was the gangsters on top. He looked at them as merely thugs who were toppling each other. So this is how he justified American foreign policy in his heart, that he wasn't screwing the Haitian people. You know what I mean?
And these thugs later turned into Papa Doc Devier, Baby Doc Devier.
The
Cacos.
The Cacos that he defeats by blowing up that whole story where he blows up their fort. You know, they're crawling through sewer tunnels or ducts. I hope this helps the Mothman. Listen, anything helps the Mothman.
Yes,
because it's a vicious opponent, and we need the Butlerism to help me, the strength of Smedley Butler to help me fight an enemy from another planet at this point. So anyway, so when he takes that fort, blows it up, kills everyone, he's literally got 20 guys, and there's hundreds of these Cacos in the fort. The Cacos later turn out to be the Tonton Macoute years later, which you're referencing to Baby Doc Duvalier and Papa Doc Duvalier, the brutal dictator and son of Haiti years later. That's what the descendants of these cats turn out to be. But to his complete chagrin, he does such a great job in Haiti that they won't let him leave. He becomes the governor of Haiti, and he can't get out of there.
As a major, by the way.
As a major, they put him in charge of a country, Eric.
Well, not only his chagrin there, but it was like he couldn't get out of it. He got stuck there, and then that screwed him over for World War I.
Right,
because he wanted so badly to go to France and fight with his men, and they're like, "Oh, this guy's the best administrator you've ever seen. You can't let this son of a bitch go here." So we're going to promote him to. He went from major to lieutenant colonel to brigadier general. It looks like, and I think he skipped colonel completely. Yeah, well, he was the youngest brigadier general, and they're like, "Congratulations, we're putting you in charge." He's like, "You sons of a bitch!"
He really wants to be with the common soldier. He doesn't even want these goddamn promotions. I mean, they give him the 2 medals of honor. The one is for the Boxer Rebellion, I guess, and the other one in Haiti. But
by the way, that is incredible because officers were not eligible for a Medal of Honor until like 1910 or 12. I don't remember, but he was well into his career before he was even eligible to get it. He probably would have picked up because the unit he was in charge of might have been Nicaragua or whatever. I think they all got CMHs themselves, all the soldiers he led. So I mean, the guy's just.
Well, just to backtrack, he joins at 16, threatens his parents that he's going to run away and join. His father's a congressman, 32-year congressman. He's on the Naval Committee. His grandfather was a congressman. He grew up with, as a Quaker, and they speak in Quaker language. When you read the letters,
thee and thou, and
yeah,
father.
And he speaks but he speaks normally with the men. But when he speaks to his father, it's in Quakerisms of thee and thou, which is really weird.
There was a funny thing his dad said, though, it was hilarious. Like he blackmailed his mother and forced her to finally take him there. And
right.
And then when he had to face his father, because he lied, and that was the biggest problem, is that he lied and said he was 18 when he was really 16. Right. And his father said, please don't go back any more years. We barely got married in 1879.
Right. It'll look like an illegal pregnant marriage. Right. That was pretty funny.
Well,
his father was quite a character too. I mean, he writes these letters to his father to get him out of these things, and his father does try to help him.
Yep.
Mostly to no avail from what the letters I've seen. Like his father says, okay, I'll bring it up in Congress. And he is painted with a brush that his dad is helping his career, which is not true, by his enemies. And the reason he has enemies, his enemies are the desk generals and desk admirals, right, Eric?
Yes. Thank you, Dan Wisnett. 1915. I couldn't remember the exact year, but 1915 for the CMH.
Yeah. So his enemies are these desk jockeys who
specifically Navy. Because this is the war between the Navy and the. I'm former military, so I can tell you there's some real friction there.
There's some bad blood between him and the Navy.
Oh, God, yeah, because the Marines were Navy thugs. Okay, the Navy just had to deal with them and did not like them in any way. They had zero respect. They're just, kind of like, I don't know, the cleanup crew, the little strong men that they had. It was like a bunch of, useless soldiers. They hated them. And so you have somebody like that who, is valorous, and he puts all these desk jockeys to shame, the admirals, and he makes no bones about his contempt either, which doesn't help.
No, it definitely doesn't help him. At one point, this admiral shows up and tours the base. I think it was in Quantico, and none of the men salute him. He says, can't you teach these men to salute? And he said, you had them for 6 years. If you couldn't do it, how can I do it in 6 days?
Yeah, which is essentially saying if they have zero respect for you, because the army soldiers later on, even more of them showed up for him than Marines sometimes, because he was in charge of a lot of army units throughout his career.
So he wants to get out of there. And we got to jump ahead here because we're going to be behind by 6 hours unless we move this story forward. He wants to get into World War I. That's his dream, right? Which is just getting started, and things are happening, but they don't want to let him leave Haiti. So in the spirit of compromise, they send him to a base in northern France, Eric, right? In Brest, which is a hellhole. There's 30,000 men, and 14,000 of them have the flu, and they're literally sleeping in the mud. I mean, it's a hellhole, and that's why he looks at everything as punishment. He looks at everything as he's being punished, but they're looking at it like this is the only guy who could save this.
Pershing actually felt kind of bad about it, but it's a weird scenario because obviously there were other good warriors. I mean, Macarthur was a warrior. Patton is there's a lot of warriors around. Right. But you had this guy who is not only a good warrior, but just an amazing administrator who could lead a country, who could do that. So he was screwed by his own talent.
Right. Well, he's also got brains. Like he had these short guns in Mexico, I think it was. So he to scare the Mexicans, he put long rods down the barrels and covered them with canvases to make them look like German 88s or something, and this was all, he was into these ruses of deceiving the other army, and getting back to the Mexico thing where he had to secure the train lines. I think that was part of his mission, was to secure the trains, again, for corporate interest. But nevertheless, this is all in preparation to go to France, Eric, which is where we are. And the men are very sick. They've all got the flu, and they can't move out of the mud. And he goes and either steals or requisitions all of this meat, right? And food and soup for them and blankets.
Yeah, the first thing he did, apparently, okay, when he arrived, he issued 6 blankets per man,
Right.
instead of the 1.
Yeah.
So that way they had enough to, get off the mud to a degree.
Right.
He doubled everybody's rations.
Right.
He had hot soup running 24 hours a day.
24/7. Right. Yeah.
And then apparently, I don't know if it was like other attack lines or whatever, where they had planks and crap laid out, probably for inside of the trenches. He snagged all of that was
Right.
around and
Right.
and gave it to him. Most importantly, though, not only did he do all this, but everywhere he was, his ass would be there with a shovel. His ass would
Right.
be there carrying a sheet of plywood or whatever it was. He was always working side by side, and it would blow the men's minds because all the junior officers would be following his example, and all of a sudden you see every captain with a shovel and everybody else, because there's
and like them,
General
he
Butler.
contracts every single disease.
Oh God, yeah.
He gets malaria, he gets typhoid, every single, and then he fakes his way out of these things. But to get back to the Boxer Rebellion, when he got his first medal, if you read the details of what happened, he gets shot in the right leg with a bunch of bullets. His right leg is gone. He finds a lieutenant whose left leg is wounded, and he says, "Let's go." And he ropes the 2 legs together, and they become one man with 3 legs and go. Oh, dude, that was the most incredible visual I read about with the Boxer Rebellion, how he did the middle leg tie up with a stick to form like one man with 3 legs, like a human tripod or something, and then went back behind the lines and started helping the other men.
Yeah, they could not stop the son of
this guy was a beast.
Or later on, there was a road march. What was it? He'd be like leading it with his horse or whatever, and there'll be a Marine who was like sagging, and it's, "Son, I'm 20 years older than you."
Oh,
grab the guy's back, throw it on his back, and then march with him. And he got the reputation.
After with the war, they give him a place called Quantico, which is a swamp near you, and he turns that into the base that it is today. Right?
Yeah. I mean, he built Quantico. I mean,
thank you, Martha.
The dude is all over the Marines.
South Texas gal's back.
Yeah, good. Look at that kid.
I like her. $9.99. 69 for 69 is still a great deal. I don't know what that means. I'm not going to go there. That sounds like fun.
Well, thank you for the super chat.
Thank you. South Texas.
But he I mean, think about it. Quantico, San Diego, every major location, all the way to, I mean, he and his buddy, I mean, because he not only wrote to his father, he also wrote to his friend Jean Lejeune all the time. Yeah. Because they were close, and he would be like, "Hey, come on, man. Right. Get me stationed here. Get me stationed here."
Right.
And ultimately, when Lejeune retired, he was the highest ranking member of the entire Marines.
Right. Yeah.
The highest.
Yeah.
And of course had to face people who were pissed off at him. I don't know if you want to go into that.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into that because he's not a fan of any of these presidents, and he's not a fan of any of these government things. And, he turns Quantico into a base and makes it run smoothly, creates it, builds it, does the whole thing. And he's still not happy with himself. He's still, he's got a wife and kids. He's not making much money, Eric, what he's doing.
He's in debt.
Yeah, he's got $300 a month for a general, or $350 or something.
Yeah, he actually wrote
it's like $532 a month for a general.
He wrote about that though, because it was like, you don't think about it, but he always had to provide for the social gatherings out of his own pocket, and there was a lot involved. He's like, "Hey, I can't afford this, and I'm sending my kid to college and have a mortgage."
3 kids who are military. They show up. His wife shows up at these battlefields every once in a while. You ever notice that? His wife shows up in China. She shows up in
Philippines,
Mexico. Right. I mean, wow. You talk about loyalty. I mean, wow. I mean, after the battle's over, roughly.
It'd be hard for her to see him. Otherwise, he worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week, pretty much for 20 years.
Well, we'll get to this point where he's now, I don't know. He gives a speech at I think it's a club in Pennsylvania, right? First of all, we should cover the Philadelphia police chief thing.
Oh yeah, because he got a special assignment.
Okay,
he does so much
unbelievable. This is great. He knows these guys in Philadelphia. Philadelphia now is crime central because of prohibition. The mob has moved in. Every politician is corrupt. Warner Brothers can't make gangster pictures fast enough. It is like today in LA on steroids. And there's speakeasy, gin joints, every kind of crime operation. Every cop is on the take, and every politician's on the take, and they're making a lot of money. So the mayor and some other forces get together and say, what if we send Smedley Butler in to become the chief safety officer of the city of Philadelphia? Now, the chief safety officer is the chief of police combined with the chief of the fire department as a general overseer of everything Philadelphia and law enforcement.
Yeah,
right,
it's like
Eric?
public safety. He was in charge of all public safety, I think.
But you're above the police commissioner.
Yep.
You are the
Yep.
police commissioner and fire commissioner, right?
Yeah, he reported to the mayor.
So this is hatched by, I think, members of the Marines who want to get him out of there in the Marines. And he's given, like, not retirement, he's given a leave of duty to do this, right?
Yes.
Okay, so he doesn't quit the Marines. This is something that's going to be for a year or two max. And he goes in and he meets with the chief of the different heads of the police department. And he says, I want your precincts cleaned up in 48 hours, or I want your resignations on my desk. And they go, go screw yourself. Who is this guy? You know, we're corrupt cops. This is Philly. Come on, we'll wait this guy out. He goes around in the span of, I think, like 2 weeks. He busts and raids over 1,000 illegal bars and gambling joints and takes down thousands of people that he arrests as the chief of police to clean up this city. I mean, a massive amount of arrests.
Unfortunately,
like
the other side of the equation, which is
unfortunately only 2% of them are prosecuted, Eric, which sounds vaguely familiar. The whole reason Eric and I are excited about this story is it has amazing echoes to today on multiple levels.
Like a century later, like you just
a century later, almost to the day, the same shit is happening again. You know what I mean? Oh, thanks, Texas gal. Anyway, I'm going to have some of my hair transplanted onto Hunley's head in an incredible spirit of court esprit, so we could work together as a team. Anyway, so he becomes chief of police. He starts busting people left and right. The mayor starts getting nervous. The people who are the power brokers go crazy, but the people love him in Philadelphia for going after the crime,
which is hilarious.
And not all of them.
Most of it. He always the guy. He's really interesting cat in that because he was very popular journalist because he was colorful. He always had a great quote. And then when he showed up, you forgot, remember he designed his own uniform?
Oh, that insane uniform with a cape.
I can't find a picture of it, but yes, it was like he showed up in his full
Batman. He shows up like Batman.
Well, he started out in his full Marine gear, and then he designed his own to do the day-to-day with the cape and the
well, he used to have these midnight dinners with the press, and then they would quote him and do all these things, and he'd keep arresting people. But the money on the other side was really big. So eventually what happens is he realizes that he's busting all these gin joints, and he's busting all these illegal speakeasies and gambling parlors. And then he goes over to the Hyatt Regency Hotel, and they're having debutante balls in there, the hoi polloi, and they're drinking. And it reminded me of the masks, Eric.
Oh, yeah.
Mask for thee, but not for me.
And this is not the guy you want to do it in front because he can't stand class warfare. It's an interesting
Didn't
factor.
it remind you of the mask policy? Like, here are these bigwigs.
Well, any policy, though, it's so prevalent. And one other thing to deal with the corruption within, because he was fighting it back and forth. I think there were like 100 precincts, and he shrank it to 30.
Oh yeah, that was an attempt at the beginning,
helped. No, I mean, helped a lot too. He's like, okay, we'll just get rid of half the people, and he was, a very effective, not successful. So it's hard to, because it was,
it was overwhelming.
It was just impossible because everybody's corrupt.
But he wants to go in. He said he's going to take 50 undercover cops in tuxedos to infiltrate these debutante balls
and lock every door, chain them up. He wanted the whole
5-star hotel in Philadelphia.
Yep, 4 Seasons. He wanted it locked up.
The 4 Seasons was one of them. Yeah. Yeah, and they were serving liquor to teenage girls too.
Oh yeah,
yeah, as part of the debutante circle or circuit, at that time. So that just infuriated the hell out of him.
Yeah, that's what really kind of brought his tenure to the end finally, because the mayor's like,
the mayor couldn't take it anymore. I think the mayor fires him, and he goes, "No one's ever spoken to me like that before. I don't even want this stinking job." He goes, "You can't fire me. I quit." And he throws his gun down and his badge, like an outlaw, like a sheriff in the Wild West or something.
Wait, what was it? He had a hot temper and he would go off. He did go off. There was only one time that he went off on this general, and it was amazing. The general went, and I think it was to his French command or whatever, and he wasn't there. And the general just read the riot act to the lieutenant who was there.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Butler went
crazy on the guy.
He was like, "You never, just son of a." And what was shocking though is the general said,
"You're right."
No, not exactly. He said, because there is a clarity about chain of command, dude. You got to get it. You don't. There's some things you don't play with. But he said, the only reason I'm going to do this for 3 reasons. And essentially, I'm not putting you in court-martial or throwing you out. Is number one, you're an amazing soldier.
Right.
Number 2, you're exhausted, bone tired,
oh, yes,
beyond all your, you can do it. Number 3, I was not correct in the way I spoke to that man. And Smedley Butler just looked at him and said, "Wow, you're an incredible commander."
Right.
And that stood out because it was one of the only people, throughout this whole thing, commanders that he had genuine respect for, and the way the guy handled it. And then the guy did call the lieutenant from the entire command,
including the cooks and bottle washers, Eric.
Oh yeah, everybody. And then he apologized for laying that lieutenant out, and that was pretty cool. It's classy all around, and I just. That was a neat little demonstration of.
Well, this is a point, where he starts to realize that war is a racket, right? And in the opening of the book, maybe I can hold on.
Actually, he said that in the book, but I think that book was kind of germinating when he made that speech.
Oh yeah.
That we were going to talk about, and I don't remember which speech that was. He was going around giving speech. The guy was one of the most popular people in the entire country. He had a roster completely full. He had so many speeches. He was like, "You know what? The only thing that's going to attract me anymore is money. You're going to have to pay me to do speeches because that's the only way I can thin the numbers. They're just too much demand." But he went and gave a speech, and it was something similar to essentially saying.
Let me just read the opening paragraph so you get an idea here. War is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, and this is relevant to today.
Yes.
It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one international in scope. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to the majority of people. Only a small inside group knows what it is about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the very many. Out of war, a few people make huge profits. In the World War, a mere handful garnered the profits of the conflict. At least 21,000 new millionaires and billionaires were made in the United States during the First World War. That many admitted their huge blood gains in their income tax returns. How many other war millionaires falsify their income tax? No one knows. And it goes on from there.
That's about bankers. And let me give some numbers because I wrote noted this for that. Bethlehem Steel.
Oh, right.
As an example. Okay, the average for the war people, from before the war, average of years what they got yearly to the war years, 1914 to 1918, was 950% increase in profit. So Bethlehem Steel, one example, from 1910 to 1914, they made good money at $6 million a year. This is Andrew Carnegie's company, if anybody's curious. From 1914 to 1918, 49 million a year. So from 6 to 49, folks. U.S. Steel, not quite as good, but they're still not too shabby. 105 million a year to 240 million a year.
Crazy.
ton of copper from 10 million a year to 34 million a year. And it goes on. I mean, it was like leather. There,
the leather stuff was ridiculous.
Yeah.
All those boots and stuff. And
yeah, they manufactured 8 boots for every soldier, and the soldiers barely got to have one. There's an overstock of all these boots, and this becomes really, really significant later when we start talking about Hoovervilles. And
well, before you get into the Hoovervilles, just make the analysis to today, where we're just shipping so many arms to Ukraine that they can't even use the arms we're shipping to Ukraine, Eric. Right?
Oh, well, yes. And
the sheer volume of it's very similar to this, is what I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah. And they never seem to ship things to the right locations either. You know?
Right.
That just, it was weird things. And then we just dispose of stuff here. We have stockpiles here and shortages here.
Well, just
body armor all the way to Iraq. Anyway,
before he gets into this,
we'll go to the speech, because the speech
is
no.
The speech in Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth Club. Yes. Where he mentions the story about Mussolini. That's the one I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
That speech not against him. He mentions a story that a guy told him. Mussolini was being driven in his brand new car, which had a cattle raker on the front. Here's some Mussolini's black shirts. But Mussolini's driving this car. He's a passenger in the car, hits a little girl, kills the girl. The car keeps going. And Mussolini makes a quote saying, "It's one life. Who cares? We got to look towards the future." Different versions of that.
He's very gentle. He patted his knee and he said, "Don't worry about it."
He says, "The future is more important than one life," I think was the quote. So Butler says this in the club speech that he's giving to these people in a private club. And there happens to be an Italian member of parliament or an ambassador or somebody there at the speech, and he immediately calls the Italian government, that immediately calls the United States government to file a complaint that this man, Butler, has told a story insulting a world leader. I don't know if this sounds familiar, of insulting the leader of another country. So Stinson, the Secretary of State, issues an apology from the United States government with Mussolini's name in it, apologizing for this degradation by Butler in a speech in Pennsylvania in a private club.
Stinson and he had history, by the way, before this point too. They did not get along before this point either. So
this is a Secretary of State. So you just go, all right. So he issues a statement, an apology to Mussolini. Okay, here's the United States apologizing to Mussolini in name, in the statement is Mussolini's name. Not vague, not anything, just Mussolini. We apologize on behalf of the United States of America. Wait, you just say, okay, maybe nothing will happen after that. But no, they get the President of the United States. Get out of there, hair man. The President of the United States signs the arrest warrant, Eric, for General Smedley Darlington Butler, and he is told that he's under arrest from a document from the President of the United States.
Keep in mind, hold on, the highest ranking member. Now, he got passed over for the promotion. Literally, a brigadier general got promoted above him to be commandant of the Marine Corps. He is in charge of Quantico.
Right.
His flag flies above it. He built the son of a bitch.
Right.
He is confined
to the base. Right.
His second in command, a brigadier general, is to take command and take his sword.
Yeah.
Well, he refused it, but anyway. And to confine, and he could not even leave to go get legal counsel. The brigadier general who took over went to go get somebody who served under him, a one-armed lawyer. I forgot the guy's name, who was like, a really high-level lawyer. And this is where it starts to get really interesting, because that lawyer is really, really sharp. And
wait. But just back up for a second, because he contacts the governor of New York to help him find a lawyer, John W. Davis. Now, John W. Davis is going to come in later in the story, because John W. Davis is from West Virginia, and he ran for president on the Democratic Party in 1924, and he's going to be the attorney for the Morgan bankers' interest. Here's FDR. He contacts FDR in New York as governor to help him with his case, Butler.
Yep.
Okay.
That's John W. Davis, second from the right. Al Smith is on the right. All talking.
Al Smith is on the
FDR.
extreme right there. That's the next governor of New York, actually, who runs for president a couple of times and doesn't get the nomination against FDR. But we're going to get to him. We're not even up to that yet. Because this story is insane.
He's now too damn busy.
Yeah, he's now going to be court-martialed and there's a trial. So he gets these top attorneys. And what Eric was hinting at, the entire American public rises up in defense of Smedley Darlington Butler.
They're pissed. Because remember, the journalists love him too. You know damn well they're stoking this.
Right.
Because the journalists love him.
Right.
Very famously, I forgot her name, but there was a female journalist who went to see him in France. Because she was going to write a hit piece on it. That was every intention, because it was a pit and this son of a bitch was in charge of it. And when she went there, she was like, holy God, I've never seen more esprit de corps in my life.
Right.
So these are the people who have dealt with him all this time. And now all of a sudden,
not only that,
government's locking
the
him
American
up.
people, including Italian Americans who hate Mussolini, plus everyone who hates fascists, or everyone who hates them. I mean, you talk about the lopsided situation. So now Stinson tries to backpedal, but they won't let him out of it.
Yeah, but he and his lawyer were like, no.
No.
What was it? He said, we'll just go ahead and gracefully leave your command,
right?
And sign an apology letter. No. You're going to take a demotion. No. Right. And then it was like, finally, what they did was he retained his command,
right?
But because he had all the power and he felt like they were humiliated enough, he wrote like a banal quasi apology letter, just saying this was intended as a private audience.
Well, this was only because of his patriotism that he does this, not out of reverence for Stinson.
Oh no, he made himself.
They tell Stinson, we're writing a letter. You're going to sign, Stinson. He goes, okay, I'll sign the letter. I'm just the Secretary of State. I'm Tony Blinken or whatever he is.
Well, it was wonderful though, because these people hated his guts, and he put it. I mean, he made them eat so much crow because they were literally having to beg him, like, come on, man, come on,
let us off of the hook.
Guess what? Who was the most important figure who said, please stop? Mussolini himself.
Oh, even Mussolini wrote a letter.
That's what he was like. You know what? You know what? It was fine. It was fine because he was getting hammered. It was international.
Because he did run the girl over, and kill her. So.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't the issue. With him, it was the popularity problem, which we will see later on that that could turn to.
Right.
But
okay, so he defeats these guys and he starts doing these speeches, right? Which is where we're going to get into the real story, which we've been beating around the bush for a while here, but we got to get going, Hunley.
You're holding us up, man. What are you going to
do? The real story is he begins to give these speeches at American Legion, various like this. Yeah, and he, just to set this up, the vets are supposed to get a bonus from the United States government for World War I. They don't get a bonus. So they try to get a bonus bill passed in the Congress. The bill is kicked around for years. Out of frustration, they march on Washington. 20,000 World War I veterans descend upon the Capitol. And they begin, here they are. It looks like an insurrection of sorts. I don't know what's going to happen next, Eric. A lot of people hiding in the buildings, I suppose, and people going into therapy. But these vets were told that they would get a bonus from the U.S. government. They were screwed. So they descend on Washington and they set up these Hoovervilles, these shacks, and they take over some buildings. They start to live there. It's like they're cooking. Their families are there. They're not going to leave this situation until they get what they want. Now, they're not violent. They're not doing anything, but they're occupying. This is like Occupy Wall Street. Okay.
Yeah, it's an early version. I mean, this is Occupy Hooverville.
That's right. That's right. And what these guys did nonviolently was to protest the fact that they had served. This is 1932. That photo there, but they are against Hoover, who is apparently completely paralyzed as a government leader in the United States as president at this time. And the amount of people who hate Hoover's guts is basically the entire country.
Yeah, because it wasn't. This is actually in New York. So I mean, so this one here's there are Hoovervilles,
right. But that one on the Capitol becomes and not just a political disaster for Hoover, it becomes an insolvable problem. So a guy on his own against Hoover's orders, and this has to be, there's some confusion about this historically, a general on his own brings in his regiment on horseback and gasses and beats and kills them in one of the bloodiest days in American history of protest.
By the way, here's first usage of tear gas.
Yes, yes.
Very significant, and that's what we have right here.
Yes.
You can see them on the right. Now, by the way, these are all veterans. So these are the people who've fought, seen their buddies die. A lot of them, you know, have been permanently injured. They're completely broke. And this is what's happening with them. You know, this is the care.
Some of them occupy those buildings in the back too that you saw behind in that photo. Some of them moved.
Yeah, these buildings here.
Right. Look at the big building in the upper right. Look at that one over there. What's that all about? So so these guys are on horseback. This whole military regiment is on horseback, being led by a guy. Look at this. Wow. This is all being led by a guy named General Macarthur, Eric, an unknown general who will now become hated by the veterans.
And his sidekick.
And his sidekick was a clerk, as he called him, named General Dwight Eisenhower. And he had a third in command for this debauchery named General Patton. So these three men.
Eisenhower was a major at the time, and Patton was also a major at the time.
Right. That's
just
right.
So people at the ranks.
I'm sorry. My bad. But one of the criticisms of Macarthur was that he rode on that white horse with all his medals in full dress uniform, commanding this bloodbath.
And this is him at the place. I mean, that's exactly, that was at that time. He had the medals. Macarthur was so glory hounded that there were comments about that he could barely had time to get the picture taken to get out of the way before they started fires and throwing at people. So, I mean, he was very concerned to make sure his picture was all over it.
Oh, yeah. This was one of the darkest days in American history because it was us versus the vets. And who shows up for this thing is Smedley Butler. And that was the footage you were showing of Smedley Butler addressing the men. This is where he comes to prominence in terms of the American public on a national scale, because he comes here to get them relief from this is actually, I think, a day or two before the bloodbath, Eric.
He's anywhere there's troops. I mean, I do recommend everybody read his book, War is a Racket. It's 60 pages or something.
It's very short. There's
toured,
also an audiobook version of it.
All over. A free one on YouTube. I mean,
we can put it up. We'll put it up on Locals for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely. Right. He toured anywhere there was soldiers that were harmed or hurting. You know, he would. What was it? He made a bunch of money on speeches. Just a short anecdote, and it was like $6,000 on a bunch of speeches, and he donated 50% of it to the veterans and the Salvation Army, because he considered that the other one that actually did any kind of work.
Right.
And people are like, holy God, you know, that's a lot of money, because he was not rich. He really needed this money. And thank you, Georgina. Thank you for donating to us.
Wow.
Anyway, what inspired him was a soldier when he was arrested and, being held on the camp or whatever. A soldier wrote him and said, this stamp is 2 cents and it's half of everything I have, but I wanted to write you to say that I'm with you.
Right.
And he took that to heart and he said, you know what, if this guy can give half of what he has, I can give half of what I have. And that's an important precursor. And why? Yeah, he's right there with the troops. I mean, just right up line, right there with the men, his men. He was constantly talking about, they need to get the money. You owe them this money. You made all this war profiteering and everything else. And meanwhile, Hoover's like, oh my God, the economy's screwed. Yeah. What are we going to do?
Well, he now switches sides. Butler's been a Republican as his father and grandfather for many years.
Yeah.
He now endorses FDR because of his hatred for Hoover and what he's done to the vets. So he says, there's no ring in my nose. I'll vote any way I want. And he, for the entertainment guys, thank you. The voting for him, he supports FDR. Now, here's where the plot thickens. This is where the plot really begins after we just gave you this intro for an hour. He's approached by a guy named Gerald Mcguire. And you say, well, who's Gerald Mcguire? Gerald Mcguire if you have a picture of this guy here, General Mcguire's got a steel plate in his head. He was in World War I. He's a vet. He's a bond salesman, but he's also tied in as an executive for the Morgan Bank interests. And that's important to this story, because what this guy does is he approaches Smedley Butler and he says that he'd like Smedley Butler on behalf of these interests. He doesn't say who it is. I can't see who's in this one here.
That's him with his attorney and William Mcguire.
Oh, right. Well, okay. So Mcguire is going to be brought in a second, but so Mcguire, and is that Doyle in there, or I can't really see?
No, it's not Doyle. It's N.L. Marks and William Mcguire.
Okay.
I don't know if I have a Doyle. I'll get a Doyle.
All right. Well, we'll bring in Doyle in a second. So Mcguire approaches Smedley Butler and he says, "We'd like you to lead an army of 500,000 veterans, because we believe that FDR going off the gold standard is going to destroy the United States of America and its economy." That's where the plot begins, Eric, if I'm not incorrect. Now, going off the gold standard is what FDR does, which is not a normal thing to do. In fact, the treasurer, the treasurer in the cabinet, the head of the Treasury Department, resigns in protest of FDR in his own cabinet over this going off the gold standard. So the Wall Street people are flipping out over this thing. And they have this guy Mcguire approach him. And Butler says, "Who is backing you?" And he won't explain who. And he doesn't believe anything that Mcguire's saying. He visits him like 6-7 times to try to talk Butler into leading this army of 500,000 men. And he thinks that Butler is going to be appointed to a cabinet position called Secretary of General Affairs. And this takes a while for Mcguire to keep trying to talk Butler into this. And Butler begins to smell a rat. And he, as the former chief of police of Philadelphia, at one point, Mcguire throws down $18,000 bills on the bed of the hotel and says, "Here's just a sample of the money we have." And Mcguire is throwing this down to convince Butler that they're backed by the Morgan interest, which is true. In fact, everything Mcguire says to Butler turns out to be true. At first, he thinks Mcguire is just a bullshitter. But no, every single thing comes out in the press month after month after month of what Mcguire tells Butler is going to happen.
Somebody's going to resign.
Someone's going to resign. This organization is going to be formed. This is going to happen in Europe. In fact, Mcguire says, "I'm going to Europe." This is an important part of the story. He says, "I'm going to Europe next month to look around at the different governments to see what kind of government we can have here on behalf of the bankers and the Wall Street." So he goes to Italy, Mcguire, and he meets with the government officials there, and he learns
France. He did a lot of
France. But first he goes to Italy, and he says the black shirts who are also ex-vets from World War I. There's a similarity in all these groups.
Yeah, all these veterans. Yeah,
all the veterans are being used by dictators to. This is where the idea comes from, I believe, from the Morgan people, is when they go to Italy, France, and Germany, they see the same pattern. Is this the Italian one or
French fascists?
Okay, we're going to go to the French next. Okay, so he goes to Italy, and those are the black shirts, but they seem little too organized in terms of just thugs. They just seem like organized thugs to him. He goes and sees the brown shirts in Germany to see how they're run, and he feels that those guys are like beer hall drunks. This is in his letters. This is not me interpreting it. He writes these letters back, which later are put into a case. But he then goes to France, which is what we're seeing here. And this is an unknown part of the story. When he goes to France, he encounters this group, which is also, 500,000 men. I mean, they have these huge armies of ex World War I soldiers that are, being used. And this is the I hate to pronounce it wrong, but it's the Croix de Faux. Maybe Viva can help us with that. It's the Croix de Faux, Viva, if that means anything, which is a right-wing organization. I think it's the Fire and the Cross is what it means, right? And
sounds
group,
right.
Hey, look, here's their logo. I mean, it's not exactly the Boy Scouts.
They're a friendly bunch.
It looks like a friendly bunch.
Doesn't that look like Raiders Lost Ark? Like they had to use that in some of it.
Yeah. So were there any big banks treated the Federal Reserve involved? Oh yeah, they all are. Yeah. They all are. Yes. Not any, every one of them. So he goes and he meets with these guys, and there's a guy named what's this guy's name? Robert S. Clark, who's involved, and
Robert Sterling Clark,
who lives in France, by the way, who ties him into these guys. He is the millionaire lieutenant that served under Butler in the Boxer Rebellion, because now he gets past Mcguire and he says, okay, I can't listen to your bullshit anymore. Who's in back of you? I want to meet the next guy. So he says, do you remember Robert Sterling Clark? And Butler goes, well, of course I do. So Clark shows up on the scene.
He had a nickname.
What? Oh, I said the millionaire lieutenant or something?
Yep. And
right.
He was a Singer fortune heir, if I recall.
Thank you for helping my story. So the reality of it,
That's why we're here. I'm here all week.
Thank you. So anyway, he says he's worth $30 million as the heir to the Singer sewing machine fortune, as Eric pointed out. And he's willing to throw in $15 million to prevent losing his other $15 million, as he says. And he also begins to work on Butler to talk him into leading this 500,000 man army to take over the United States government. And you just go, all right, is this
him later? This is him probably during this plot.
Right. Okay. So up the ladder of command, they admit that they've already gone to Butler. Butler is the second choice. The first choice is General Macarthur. And Macarthur, because he's now hated by the men, is no longer an option. And Mcguire tells Butler this, and Butler goes, well, of course. I mean, the men hate his guts, rightfully so. And what he does is every step of the way, Butler literally tells him to go F himself. But he does this on purpose because the guy keeps revealing more and more information as Butler plays harder and harder to get. So Butler contacts an old friend from the Philadelphia Record, one of the guys who was helping him when he was a cop there, and named Paul Cumley French. And he's an investigative reporter. And here's French working around the clock. That's what I used to look like at the Weekly when I had a deadline. This could have been my photo at the.
You're like, how's Bat Boy going to get in here? I got to get.
No. That's the national. That's the one in Florida. When I was doing the reporting here in L.A., this was me covering a real hot story. So anyway, this guy Paul Cumley French begins to interview Mcguire, and Mcguire thinks he's going to get friendly press out of French, and begins to tell him the whole story. And he tells him the American people are saps. They'll go along with this. We're going to ease Roosevelt upstairs. He tells him the plot. And the plot involves creating a new cabinet position, which will be filled. Originally, I thought it was Butler, but it's really not. It's another guy named General U.S. Johnson, who's going to be the dictator. And that's going to be Secretary of General Affairs. Secretary of General Affairs will be a cabinet level appointment that will be pushed upon Roosevelt by having these 500,000 men outside the White House. It's the extent of the plot.
By the way, this is really scary to consider because I did not realize this. They thought this all through.
Oh yeah, this was not a couple of guys in a bar. This is
no constitutional prohibition to creating a new cabinet position.
That's right.
And it's like, whoa. So the idea was that everybody knew that Roosevelt was sick. And,
right.
And of course he really was rich. He's from a rich family, so he'll come in line later. But we'll have this secretary to ease the burden of all that, little shit.
Right. And they plan to force out the VP Nance. And then the Secretary of State, I think, is going to resign his position. And this guy will now be able to run the day-to-day. And that FDR will be like a figurehead, like a king. That they'll keep him on like Mussolini did and like Hitler did with Kaiser Wilhelm. He'd be like a chancellor in their plan. Now, keep in mind, they've got unlimited money, and Mcguire now brings in Doyle, and the two of them meet with Butler. They throw down this money. But he also tells him that there's going to be a new group being formed in a month or two. And that's called the American Liberty League. And that American Liberty League, he says, and he's correct, is going to have the biggest names in American politics. And indeed, it does. And a lot of these guys, oddly enough, which is why this story is suppressed, in my humble opinion, were Democrats. This guy, John W. Davis, I don't know who this is here. This is
John W. Davis.
Oh, it's John W. Davis, right? This guy, John W. Davis. I'm sorry. They're different ages. I don't know.
No, I know.
I don't know what age they are. He ran for president in 1924 as a Democrat. He later became the head of the DNC. But his real job in this plot is he is the highest level plotter that is ever going to be named, because he is the lawyer for the Morgan Bank entire interests. So he is speaking on behalf of J.P. Morgan and the Morgan banking industry. And
he wrote the speech.
He wrote the speech that they wanted Butler to give about the gold standard at the American Legion, and Butler won't do it. There's J.P. Morgan, the guy behind the scenes pulling the puppet strings. He does not show up, but he is represented by Davis, and Davis is the one pulling the strings. Now, in this group is Al Smith, the former governor of New York, the Democratic candidate, who loses to FDR for the nomination. These are not minor officials.
Who Smedley Butler knew back in the day.
Everybody seems to know everybody, right? But what I'm saying is, this is, as Mcguire promised, this is a bipartisan group, as somebody pointed out, of the wealthiest people in the United States. You've got the head of DuPont in there. You've got the head of U.S. Steel. You've got all these different heads, Eric. And within DuPont, the head of DuPont is a guy named John Raskob, who he was the head of the DNC. I take that back. But DuPont has a small company that they want to get involved in this thing, and that's called Remington. And they make rifles. So now we've got Remington, we've got 500,000 men, we've got DuPont, which is extremely right-wing, we've got Remington Arms involved. This is not a harebrained scheme, Eric.
Mm-mm.
This is not a couple of jerk-offs in a bar.
Well, this is proof of what a lot of people are saying now. It's not Republican and Democrat.
Right,
it's
right.
class. It's haves and have-nots.
Mm-hmm.
And the same way, this goes back to the Lincoln assassination, right? Who's going to benefit here? And it makes sense. It has nothing to do with Democrat or Republicans.
No,
it's the richest people in the freaking country.
Right. And their claim is that if we don't model ourselves after Mussolini, if we do not have a corporate fascist United States government, that the communists are going to come in and take over the United States. This is their claim. And that FDR has gone over to the dark side, Hunley. FDR is now full-bred communist, and he has to be stopped, and we have to take down the United States government. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty insane. It's pretty insane because of how many people are involved, the money involved. And okay, so what this guy does, Butler, is he starts believing that this thing is real for the first time, Eric. And he's right. At the beginning, he's poo-pooing it as a bunch of knuckleheads. But now, as each level of the plot is revealed to him, and that American Legion thing, that American Liberty League thing really shook him. That really shook him because that was quite real, and that was quite large and involved a lot of named people who were not hiding in the shadows anymore, Eric. You know?
Yeah, and also when he turned down the speech that he was going to give, who was it? Mcguire made the phone call from his house and said, "Go ahead, you can use the telegrams." And then he read in the paper the next day that all of a sudden, the gold standard proclamation carried, and all these telegrams floated in. And he's like he was watching it real time from the side, going, "Oh, geez, you know, this is all lining up exactly."
Right. And to be honest, I think that they were going to throw Butler under the bus once they accomplished what they wanted, because they had this guy, General Johnson, waiting in the wings to be the dictator, not Butler. They knew Butler was too erratic and too patriotic. They simply wanted Butler to rally the men, the 500,000 troops. And Butler said, if I get one whiff of fascism coming to me, If I smell fascism involved in your plot, I will find 500,000 other soldiers to fight your 500,000, and we'll duke it out in a civil war right here in the United States. That's what he told the guy.
I think he said something like, "I will whip your ass" or something.
Well, I didn't want to say that. Obviously, you have.
But it was very much like, I will go after you. Yeah,
right.
Sure.
But I mean, does it sound familiar, Eric? I mean, it's like almost what's going on.
Yeah, except we don't have a Smedley Butler anymore.
We don't have a Smedley Butler, which is the point of this whole story. We need a Smedley Butler. Alert, alert, alert. So anyway, so Butler goes to the Congress and goes to Dick Stein and John McCormick and reveals this plot for the first time to the United States Congress. Now, keep in mind, he is not unfamiliar with the operations of the United States Congress, Butler. His father was a congressman. His grandfather was a congressman. So it's not like some nutty general just, yelling into the night. He knows how to pull the levers of power. He was raised in this world. And they form a committee called the McCormick-Dick Stein Committee. And it's the first House Un-American Act, the first time the House Un-American Activities Committee has anything to do. And this is the first event of the House Un-American Activities Committee, UAC. And he goes and tells this story, and they are stunned. And the New York Times gets involved and puts it on the front page. This is the front page of the New York Times, November 21st, 1934. Just read what that says if you're at home naked or with clothing on. It doesn't really matter because you can read it either way. General Butler bears fascist plot to seize government by force. Now imagine waking up and reading your paper on Wednesday, November 21st on the front page of the New York Times. Says bond salesman as representative of Wall Street Group asked him to lead army of 500,000 in march on Capitol. Those named make angry denials. Dick Stein gets charged. And it goes into the body of the article in more details, which we've already discussed. But the reality of it is, they call Butler before the committee. Butler tells them the whole story. And then they call Mcguire. Mcguire testifies under oath that Butler is completely full of shit. He's making this entire thing up. I never said anything like this, says Mcguire. I mean, you read the transcripts of Mcguire, it sounds like some of the people who've testified recently from the Ukraine, Vindman, some other guys that we've seen testify under oath in the past couple of years. Mcguire denies everything. However, remember the name of Paul Cumley French. He's brought in and he backs up Butler 100%. And he took notes and he said it was far worse than even Butler alleges. Go ahead.
Let's let Butler tell us.
Okay, go ahead, General.
Just over a minute.
Okay.
I appeared before the Congressional Committee, the highest representation of the American people, under subpoena to tell what I knew of activities which I believe might lead to an attempt to set up a fascist dictatorship. The plan as outlined to me was to form an organization of veterans, to use as a bluff or as a club at least, to intimidate the government and break down our democratic institutions. The upshot of the whole thing was that I was supposed to lead an organization of 500,000 men, which would be able to take over the functions of government. I talked with an investigator for this committee who came to me with a subpoena on Sunday, November 18th. He told me they had unearthed evidence linking my name with several such veteran organizations. As it then seemed to me to be getting serious, I felt it was my duty to tell all I knew of such activities to this committee. My main interest in all this is to preserve our democratic institutions. I want to retain the right to vote, the right to speak freely, and the right to write. If we maintain these basic principles, our democracy is safe. No dictatorship can exist with suffrage, freedom of speech, and press.
There we go.
Wow. Hoo-ha. I think Al Pacino should have played him in his heyday. Have you had Al going hoo-ha? That would have been very effective. But yeah, I mean, look, we're not talking out of school. This is documented stuff. And now what we have are the plotters being brought into the broad sunlight of liberty by this guy and the media. So what happens now? You have possibly what I call one of the first notations or acts of the deep state ever recorded. And what you see now is the complete 108. Yeah, you can throw up a little hoo-ah. This is Al, who I guess this was a dress rehearsal for a movie that I never got made, where Al Pacino plays Smedley Butler, but he's blind here in this one. But anyway, so that was from Scent of a Woman, by the way. Yeah. So he now has the bright light of liberty shining upon this plot, and all of a sudden, there's nowhere to run or hide for these Morgan bankers and everyone else. So the deep state begins to attack Smedley Butler. The New York Times pivots 180 degrees, denies this ever happened, even though it's literally in their paper weeks before on the front page. Sound familiar, folks? Sound familiar?
No, it doesn't sound anything like a laptop at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
12 other stories, hoax.
I don't think it sounds anything like Poland invading Germany.
Right, same newspaper, 1939, the front page, New York Times. Poland invades Germany. Not the Onion, not the Babylon Bee, New York Times, folks. Anyway, so the New York Times and the other papers begin to turn on Butler. Calling him a crank and a crackpot, and unfortunately, there's a lot of records. So Dick Stein and McCormick later become Speaker of the House. Dick Stein turns out to be, by the way, he's a uber liberal congressman from a place called Manhattan. Turns out he's revealed a year later to be taking $12,500 a year from a place called the Soviet Union as a spy inside of our own government. Just a side note about Dick Stein.
Interesting comment here.
I don't know what this is about here.
Our Smedley Butler supposed to be Michael Flynn.
Very good.
Maybe
something to think about. There's so many echoes to this story, Eric, that you and I have talked about. So, I mean, they start to denounce Butler. However, they've got transcripts of the court of the committee hearings. So Dick Stein takes them. What does he do? Puts them in the National Archives, just like the Kennedy stuff. Buries them in the archives after deleting, quote unquote, the hearsay stuff. Inside of the story of Mcguire and others, the hearsay is all of the testimony. And Dick Stein himself becomes a Soviet spy a year later. And after 2 years, he gets fired by Stalin because he's not producing enough money to justify the $12,000 a year. He gets fired as a Soviet spy. Side note, having nothing to do with this story, but McCormick later becomes Speaker of the House. And Dick Stein, I guess, I don't know if he went to jail or whatever, but obviously a crook, an ideological Stalinist, and a crook. But the point of the matter is the deep state comes in as brazenly and as evilly as they've done in the past couple of years to crush this story. And some of the rumors, I mean, this was on the cover of Time magazine, this story. This was not some obscure...
Wait. Is this the same Time magazine that said that there was a cabal?
Yes.
100 years later?
Yes.
At same time?
It's the pivot, the how fast they pivoted that reminds me of today. That this is a story breaking in November 1934, and by January 1935, they're pivoting, saying, we never said that. What cover of Time magazine? What are you talking about, cover of New York Times? They pivot. The rumor has always been that FDR did it, that FDR said, all right, this has always been, again, the Democratic Party rumor.
Which is very possible, by the way.
Which is very possible. I'm not diminishing that possibility.
He did manage to this is his first term.
Yeah.
And he managed to pull 3 other elections out.
Right.
Could have been helpful, right?
He said he needed the Democrats who were involved in the plot, and he needed the money of the corporate banking industry because of the Depression. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely means, motive, and opportunity here on the part of FDR to make this go away, Eric. I mean, it's not a crazy harebrained scheme on FDR's part, but to see the wheels turn in real time, like today, to see these committees like a Schiff, like an Adam Schiff, turn the wheels and just lie in public under oath about this event that happened literally 60 days before in terms of being under oath testimony in his own committee hearing room is the first sign from me historically watching this. And I know we covered the Lincoln assassination. There was a conspiracy and that nature. But here we see the actual machinery of the deep state, for me, for the first time, out and open in the broad daylight.
Right. Even though I'm going to have to concur with Barnes that the Lincoln assassination could have been the first. So
I agree.
it's you know what this reminds me of like they keep saying, the first woman was Eve, and it was like what 10-20,000 years or whatever, and they keep finding earlier humans. Like here in the United States, they're like, okay, they came over across the Bering Strait, and then they found
right. No, I know. But that's
so
more
like
scientific. That's more
this is
scientific.
kind of a similar thing. It's like you just keep having to reset the clock. It's like, oh, the chicanery is earlier. Oh, wait,
right.
No, it was even earlier.
This is where I am right now, personally, in terms of going back in time for the
Sure.
most obvious example that I can say to a guy at a bus stop. This is my first example of the deep state that I could lay out, because I see it in the Kennedy assassination, the burying of documents in the National Archives, the phony autopsy, the documents, the papers, the media. Okay, that's pretty clear, and originally those people in 1964 were ridiculed. And here you've got the same thing in 1934. So now we're going back 30 years. I'm not saying there's nothing in 1904. There probably
well, yeah,
is.
30 years, just over 30 years before that, McKinley was killed, and that was a plot with the Puerto Rican.
Okay, that's we're going to have to do an episode on McKinley because I know a lot about the McKinley situation. I mean, this is never going to end, Hunley. We're going to have to go back to Adam and Eve.
Well, we got to keep a show going, dude.
No, but I mean, we're never going to run out of stuff. We keep going back in time, and now we're catching up because stuff is happening in real time here now.
Yeah,
which I guess Barnes and Viva can deal with the real time. We don't have time for the real
time.
Yeah,
well, at least we have a
There's enough guys covering the real time, right?
When we get remonetized, if we talk about the past versus now, because
we're just talking about the past and they take away our money. We're not even.
Oh God, yeah, they do. I mean,
when do we go yellow? When I put the tie on?
I don't even know. Let me look. Yeah, we are yellow though. But, request review. We're talking about an old soldier from 100 something. Yep, got to go yellow.
You got to go yellow. I mean, look, this story is one of the greatest. It's so sad that this is not taught in schools because it covers so many levels of Americana, World War, the Banana Wars, the military itself, the hero.
His stuff is a laundry list. I'm like, we went there and there and there and there. And I mean,
how many wars did he fight in? How many not wars, but interventions?
Well, he was in every police action I think we had from 1890 forward.
Right.
I mean, it was around 1900. I can't remember. He was born in 1880.
Just want to add one thing about John W. Davis, who, don't forget, John W. Davis is the attorney that Butler wants to defend him in the court martial.
Mm-hmm.
That's who he wants as his lawyer, who later comes to offer him money to plot to take down Roosevelt. But John W. Davis had multiple wives that died. He had a later wife, and they adopted a son. Is this Davis again?
Yeah.
He's a dapper-looking guy. I got to tell you, man. He's
no wonder he's got the ladies. He's got the money. Him
and his father were involved in the creation of the state of West Virginia. The Wheeling Declaration, I think it was, that created West Virginia. If anybody out there lives in West Virginia who knows anything about this, please contact this station.
Speaking of which.
What?
That leads into a segue
of
what we have coming in May.
Oh, well, you're jumping ahead here. I just want to go back to W. Davis. They adopt a kid who grows up to be a grown man, him and his wife. And that man, ironically, as a baby, is named Cyrus Vance, who grows up to be the Secretary of State for Jimmy Carter. I mean, these bloodlines, and this is not a bloodline, but this is obviously a paper line. But take FDR, for instance. By marriage or blood, FDR is related to 11 other United States presidents. That's insane. And he's also related to General Lee and Jefferson Davis as a sidebar, right, Eric?
Mm-hmm.
Right, but he's related to 11 other presidents by blood or marriage. Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Of course. I'm starting with Teddy.
It's on YouTube. Yeah, we said that at the beginning. Yeah.
No, I know, but I want to thank him for the super chat.
Oh, I didn't see that.
And his point that the most decorated officer in the USA is denied a field command during World War I. No wonder he exposed him.
Well, that he wouldn't agree that was true, but yeah, it does build up inside him, the resentment. He would never agree that that's why he did it. I mean, he's forced. He doesn't feel like he's going to out them, with this plot at the beginning. He's batting this guy away, Mcguire, as a busy fly, right, Eric?
Well, and he's a little bored. He just retired, and he's like,
right.
"Oh, going on here? And
well, those $18,000 bills, $18,000 bills on a bed, and what does he say, Eric?
Well, he said he was the safety officer in Philadelphia. He said, "No way you're giving me that. Those are all marked, or sorry, they're all recorded. And if
the serial numbers,
as soon as I go to spend them somewhere." But think about that for a second. This is in 1930 something. They had $1,000 bills. I think they stopped it.
I love that.
I'm like, why don't they have them now? They had them all the way then, but now. I think they got rid of them in the 40s or something. I mean,
well, it says gold note. It says gold note on the bill. I don't know.
Maybe that's why gold standard.
Those were actually backed by gold. Those $1,000 bills. It says gold note on the front of the bill. I don't know who the president is on there, but I mean,
and I think we had $500 bills too.
That I don't know. The 1,000 one I found a picture of. I thought it was like a lot of little zeros there in all four corners. It's a messy looking bill. But the fact that this guy, Mcguire, he's merely demonstrating how much money is in back of him. He takes out $18,000 bills in the Depression and throws them down on the bed in the hotel room. I mean, and he doesn't blink, Butler. And he could have used that money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But he had so much pride that it was kind of like.
Right.
Because they also said, hey, you have a mortgage? We can take care of it.
Oh, yeah. We'll take care of the mortgage. I stand with General Grobert. We will hold the line until they release all the Mothman files. Viva the Purple Cup. Yeah, the Purple Cup will be an award in later battles. It'll be a miniature Purple Cup with a pin. You know, I once made a brooch in 3rd grade for my mother. We had to like take plaster of Paris, put some little fake jewelry in it, in a little gift box, put a safety pin in it, right? From behind, let it harden. It was for Mother's Day. We all had to make this. And I put in some junk jewelry, made this plaster of Paris thing in a little box with a safety pin. I took it out and I put it on my mother's blouse, and it ripped the blouse, exposing her tit in the classroom. So be careful of the type of jewelry you make for your mother. And remember that on Mother's Day, it's a special holiday, which is coming up in a couple of months in May. Say, oh, here it is, the $500 bill.
And then they also
pretty normal, the $500 bill.
Notice it's McKinley on it. It died too.
It died when McKinley died. Oh,
Bill died.
Dude, Eric, what about the story when during the boxer?
Yep, Cleveland.
Oh, there it is. Who's on there?
Cleveland.
Oh, Grover Cleveland. Wow, weird guys on these bills, man.
Yeah, presidents.
What about the story where Butler gets shot and the bullet goes through his chest? Not the bullet. The bullet hits his brass button. The button goes into his chest, and on his full chest is what, Eric? A tattoo.
He's got an eagle, the Marine eagle, which has a wound in it.
Right. The button goes into the eagle's head, and he's annoyed by this because it like semi-penetrates his chest. But even getting that tattoo from a Japanese tattoo artist causes him to get yellow fever.
Yes.
With the needles. With the
he had freaking everything.
Oh my God. The craziest story of all time. But you were saying, I'm sorry, about Mother's Day, which is around the time of May 11th, right? Is it Mother's Day?
Oh, okay. What we have coming up, because, wow, we've gone way long. May 14th through 16th, somewhere in that time frame. That's the Saturday through the Monday. We will be in the Charleston, West Virginia area, which is
looking for the Mothman.
Mothman's like an hour out. Okay. This is the biggest city.
But we're going to put a wide net for the Mothman, you're saying?
We're putting a wide net for the Mothman, but also for audience, because we don't know. We may have a huge contingent in Charlestown, West Virginia. I don't know, but we definitely, if people, and we'll keep putting this out show after show.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Right.
If people want to come and meet up,
right,
please contact us.
Right.
And so we can kind of get an idea, like, are there people there? Are there, are there not?
Bonus,
very, very cool.
We get 20,000 war veterans will show up.
I definitely.
Part 3 of Wayne Rogers' City of Angels covered the November plan. I don't know what that means, but
maybe that's the business plot. I'm not sure, but thank you.
I don't know. David. Yeah. Thank you.
But please, if you're on Locals, post there. You can always email me, through the contact form, erichunley.com/contact, and say, hey, I'll be there. I live there.
Oh, I see. You're saying,
tweet at us.
You could come out of DC, right? There could be DC people or Florida people or New York people.
Well, yeah.
What's the closest big city? Pittsburgh? or DC? I'm trying to.
I don't know. I mean, Charlestown is the bigger city.
Where
we're going is Point Pleasant, which is an hour outside.
No,
of
but I'm saying, other than Charlestown, what's the next biggest city?
I don't know. I'm not. I'd have to pop open a map and take a look.
All right, well, don't worry about it.
I'm not from there.
Right.
Could be DC.
You can PayPal me for the Mothman Prophecies return trip to catch him and bring him back to justice to stand trial in the International Court in The Hague.
Or Venmo. We both take PayPal, Venmo.
And don't forget the merch. If you people are going to show up, it would be great if you wore the merch. A, because we like to sell merch. B, we can quickly identify you as being part of the plot. And
absolutely.
we will then, if you have the hat or if you have the cup, the famous cup,
T-shirt, anything.
Tote bag,
somebody just posted that they had. Somebody posted pictures of the merch on Locals and on Twitter.
A lot of people are getting it. Yeah, the tote bag seems to be very popular with the ladies.
Oh, it's a pretty good bag.
Yeah, but the T-shirt is good too.
By the way, I've made more available too, where there's now technical tee. There should be technical tee. So like if you want to go run with it, you can sweat in it. A tank top should be available now as well.
Are you kidding me?
So I'm trying to put more, a little bit out there, different items that might be good for the weather.
Now, we could put these documents for Butler up on Locals, right? All these various things and photos of Butler to the Locals community.
Sure.
And other Locals people can see that, Eric? Of other Locals?
Anybody,
like the Barnes Viva Locals can get on ours and see it, and vice versa?
Some of them, I mean, a lot of the Butler stuff, I don't mind. I'll just put up there and anybody can see. Sometimes things are behind the paywall, but it's still worth following no matter what, because there's a lot going on there. I have a show with Nate I do every Sunday. That's free for anyone.
Off the cuff, how would you subscribe to our show if just talking out of school? How would a person, like a random person, what incredible machinations in your mind?
Well, mash is part of it, actually.
Mash
the button.
How would
the button?
And what would stop a person from subscribing, in your humble opinion?
I don't know.
So how
it might be malnutrition or malfeasance, or
they've got yellow fever, or they've got malaria. They've been in a jungle fight, a jungle war. It could be,
but Smedley Butler would hit the button.
Let me tell you something. This guy Butler would crawl over broken glass naked to subscribe to this channel. You know that in your heart. You all know that. And yet, for some reason, you sit at home and look at that button all night saying, I just can't bring myself to subscribe. I mean, you really have to take a look in the mirror and see what kind of person you are at this point in American history to not subscribe to this channel where Hunley and I have to read and do all this stuff just to bring you even the bare crumbs of history. And trying to dig us out of this mess we're in now. The lazy degenerates. Let's face it, you are a bunch of lazy degenerates.
Not those of you who subscribed. We love you.
I love you, but look, I'm a lazy degenerate too. So take it from me. If I was on your side, I would have to force myself to crawl over. But I would, because it doesn't cost a cent. And I can't emphasize, it's the most startlingly shocking thing. Hunley tries to explain it to me every other night, and I still can't get my mind around it. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe. It doesn't do anything, and yet you can't bring yourself to subscribe. I'm sorry. I find this hard to accept as a man.
But we have hope. We have faith. So everyone, please consider subscribing.
Consider it.
And more, and like this on your way out. And if you don't mind, share it. Please tell a friend, because that will help us more than anything, is get the word out so other people can see it. Obviously, things get suppressed. We're yellow. And when we're yellow, YouTube says that we have limited advertiser potential. So that means they don't want to make the money. So then they knock it down in the algorithm.
I'm new to this.
You're sharing it helps.
I don't know what he's talking about. All I know is we got to get shirts for Hunley that have a collar on it. And if we can start building up some wealth.
A comb for Mark and a collar for Eric.
We could begin to put clothing on Eric Hunley, a poor orphan boy who was in the military for many years, peeling potatoes, and somehow escaped to bring us these great channels that Hunley presents on a daily basis.
Arms for the poor.
Arms for the poor. So PayPal me so I can get the Mothman prophecies delivered to your door with the Mothman, and I can get shirts for Eric Hunley.
All right, folks. And until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you.